The dust hadn't settled from the greatest livestock raid in frontier history. One man tracked the stolen herd across 100 miles of desert. What he found wasn't a battle, it was a reckoning. And the 30 Comanche warriors who had taken everything from his village uttered just 4 words that would bind their fate to his forever. "Now we follow you." This is the story of that man, a solitary Texan rancher named Elijah Carter, and the unprecedented pact forged in the aftermath of the Great Raid of 1840. In an era defined by relentless bloodshed between settlers and the lords of the southern plains, his actions defied every expectation. But why would the most feared horsemen on the continent swear loyalty to the very people they were raiding? And what impossible price would this bond eventually demand? The answer begins with a loss that threatened to destroy everything. For Elijah Carter, the summer of 1840 began with silence. Not peace, but the hollow, ringing silence of a corral that should have been lowing with 150 head of cattle. All that remained were churned mud and the fatting tracks of a skilled, ruthless driving team. The Comanche raiders had come in the dead of night, a ghost operation that stripped his ranch and every small homestead in the San Antonio River Valley clean. His life's work, the community's entire livelihood, was gone. Elijah was 38, a man built more from weathered sinew than bulk, with a face carved deep by sun and wind. He had come to Texas a decade earlier, fleeing a different kind of emptiness back east after a fever took his young wife and infant son. He found not a new start, but a different shade of solitude on this hard scrubland. He spoke little, trusted less, and his only genuine talent was reading the story of the earth. He could track a quail across stone, tell the age of a hoofprint by the crispness of its edge in the morning dew. This skill had earned him no friends, only a wary respect from neighbors who needed something found. Now what needed finding was everything. The settlement of 20 families was facing starvation by winter. Their cash was the cattle, their security was the cattle. Without it, they were destitute. A meeting was called in the smoke-filled cantina. Men, faces drawn with panic and rage, argued for forming a posse. But old Miguel, whose father had been taken in a raid years before, shook his head. "You chase Comanche with anger, you find only your grave. They ride with 3 horses each. They scatter like smoke. You will ride in circles until your own horse dies." The room fell into a despairing quiet. Then all eyes turned to Elijah, who stood apart, leaning against the doorframe. He had been studying the mental map of the tracks he'd seen at dawn. "They're headed for the Llano Estacado," he said, his voice a low rasp. "The staked plains, not to eat the herd, to trade it." He explained what few settlers fully understood. This wasn't a raid for food. It was a commercial operation. The Comanche, masters of the horse, had become masters of a brutal market. They would drive the stolen Texas Longhorns northwest, across the vast Comancheria, to the hidden canyon markets where Comancheros, Hispanic and renegade American traders, waited with guns, ammunition, and goods. Their cattle would fund the very weapons used in the next raid. The plan was suicide. One man against the most formidable light cavalry on the continent, deep in their own impenetrable territory. But a posse was a slower, more obvious suicide. Elijah made it clear he asked for no one to follow. This was his debt, his failure. He had been on watch that night. He had seen nothing, heard nothing. The shame was a hotter burn than the anger. He left at first light with a canteen, a sack of jerky, his Kentucky long rifle, and his best horse, a steady gelding named Pax. He carried no flag of truce. He carried no hope of treaty. He carried only a cold, singular purpose: find the herd and take it back, or die trying. The trail was not hard to follow for him. 150 cattle leave a highway on the land. He saw the intelligence in the drive, the avoidance of soft ground that would slow the herd, the use of dry creek beds to hide numbers, the precise spacing of outriders. This was not a panicked theft. This was a military maneuver. For 7 days, Elijah followed the ghost of his own wealth deeper into a landscape that grew more alien and hostile with each mile. The lush river valleys gave way to rolling scrub, then to the immense, terrifying openness of the high plains, a sea of grass under a bowl of sky. Here he was not the hunter but the exposed prey. Every shadow in a draw could be a scout. Every dust devil could hide a rider. He moved now only at dawn and dusk, sleeping fitfully in shallow washes by day. On the 8th day, he found the first sign that the trail was turning. Not north toward the traditional Comanchero haunts near the New Mexico border, but east, back toward the hill country. It made no tactical sense. Then he found the second sign, a single cowboy boot worn through at the heel, discarded. Then a trampled piece of calico cloth. This wasn't just a cattle drive. There were captives. The raiding party had hit another, smaller settlement on their winding return. The stakes had just multiplied. The cold purpose in Elijah's gut turned to ice. He pushed packs harder, and on the morning of the 10th day, climbing a gentle rise of Caprock, he saw them. The herd was a dark, slow-moving stain on the golden plain 5 miles distant, and between him and them, a smaller, faster cloud of dust was moving away from the herd, coming directly toward his position. A scouting party, 3 riders. They had seen him. He had minutes. He could run and be run down in the open. He could fight and be overwhelmed. Or he could do the one thing no sane man on the Texas frontier would ever do. He slid off packs, ground-tied him in a low gully, and stepped out into the clear, raising his hands away from his body, his rifle left in its scabbard. He stood completely still as the 3 warriors closed the distance at a gallop, their lance points catching the savage sun. They encircled him, saying nothing, their painted faces unreadable. The lead rider, younger than the others with a single eagle feather in his braided hair, lowered his lance until the point hovered an inch from Elijah's chest. Elijah met his gaze, then slowly pointed east, toward the distant dust of the herd. Then he pointed to his own eyes and back to the herd. He had no words they would understand, only the raw, undeniable truth of his presence. I see what you have. I am here for it. The young warrior stared, his eyes flicking from Elijah's empty hands to his determined face. Then he did something inexplicable. He raised his lance tip. He barked a word to his companions, and instead of striking, he gestured sharply for Elijah to follow. It was not a request. It was an order. The other 2 fell in behind, cutting off any retreat. Elijah was not a prisoner. He was a curiosity being taken to the heart of the storm. He mounted packs and was led at a trot toward the immense cattle drive, his mind racing. What he expected to find was a war chief, a council of elders ready to decide his fate. What he found instead was chaos, and a leader who was dying. The cattle herd was a sprawling, nervous river of beef, guarded by not 30 but nearly 50 warriors, women, and older boys. But at the center of the camp, all order had broken down. A man lay on a buffalo robe, his chest wrapped in blood-soaked bindings. He was older, with a fierce, hawk-like face now gray with pain. This was not some young raider. This was Iron Shirt, a respected Caban war chief. The young scout who had captured Elijah pushed through the crowd, speaking rapidly, pointing at the white man. Angry faces turned toward Elijah. Weapons were gripped tighter. This was it, the end of his hunt. But then a woman knelt by Iron Shirt's side, placed a hand on a warrior's arm, stopping him. She was older, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes holding a terrifying calm. She looked at Elijah, then at the dying chief, and spoke a single word in Comanche, Tejanos, Texans. Then she pointed at the crude bandage and made a cutting motion near her own heart. The message was clear. The chief had been shot by Texans, and they thought Elijah, a Texan, might know something about it, or might be responsible. Elijah shook his head slowly, meeting her gaze. He pointed to himself, then mimed riding from the east, following tracks. He was not with the shooters. He was following the same trail they left. The woman, Iron Shirt's wife, he would learn, studied him. She pointed to the wound again, then to Elijah, and tilted her head in question. Could he help? Medicine. They had no medicine. The bullet was deep, likely festering. In their swift retreat with the herd and captives, Elijah could now see 2 terrified Mexican children tied nearby. They had no time for proper healing. The great raider was being killed not by a blade, but by a tiny piece of lead and the infection blooming behind it. Every frontier instinct screamed at Elijah to refuse. This man had orchestrated the theft that would ruin him. His people were the reason for a decade of fear and bloodshed. Helping him was treason. But Elijah's eyes flicked to the captives, to the nervous herd, to the armed, leaderless band that would fracture the moment Iron Shirt died. Chaos meant a scattered herd. Chaos meant the captives might be killed. Chaos meant he would never get his cattle home. He nodded. A space was cleared. His possessions, including his rifle, were taken, a pragmatic move he expected. But they left him his knife, a sign of morbid trust or a test. He asked for hot water, for clean cloth, for the strongest liquor they had. He was brought a water skin, strips of untanned hide, and a clay jug of pulque, a crude fermented drink. It would have to do. The operation was a brutal, ugly thing under the open sky. Elijah had dug bullets out of men before, but never one so deep. Using his knife heated in the cookfire, he cut away the corrupted flesh. Iron Shirt never cried out, his teeth clenched on a leather strap, his eyes locked on Elijah, with a stare that was both challenge and appraisal. When the lead ball, misshapen and bloody, finally clinked into a wooden bowl, the women quickly packed the wound with a poultice of mashed herbs Elijah didn't recognize. Their medicine was better than his. For 3 days, Elijah lived in a state of suspended execution. He was not bound, but he was watched every moment. He tended to the chief, changing dressings. In return, he was given food, tough strips of dried buffalo meat and water. He used the time to study the operation. This was no rogue band. It was a family group, a rancheria on the move. The cattle were wealth, but they were also a liability, slowing down the very people defined by speed. They needed to get to the trading point. On the 4th morning, Iron Shirt's fever broke. He was weak, but his eyes were clear. He called for Elijah. Through his wife, who spoke a broken Spanish mixed with Comanche, a conversation unfolded. Iron Shirt's questions were direct. Why did you follow? Why did you help? Elijah's answers were just as direct. You took what was mine. I came to take it back. I helped because a dead chief helps no one, and your people were about to kill me. A grim smile touched Iron Shirt's lips. The honesty seemed to amuse him. He then asked the question that changed everything. How did you find us so fast? Elijah explained the signs, the choice of the hard ground, the use of the dry arroyo, the pattern of the outriders. He spoke not as a rancher, but as a tracker, as a hunter. Iron Shirt listened intently. Then he pointed a bony finger at the young scout who had first found Elijah, the one with the single eagle feather. T-U-H-U-Y-A, he said, coyote running. He is a good hunter, but you followed the thinking, not just the track. It was the highest compliment a Comanche could give. Their entire culture was built on the intellectual art of the hunt, of warfare, of raiding. To understand the mind of your prey or your enemy was everything. In that moment, Elijah Carter ceased to be just a Tejano. He became a fascinating anomaly, a man who could think like them. Iron Shirt made a decision. He ordered the 2 Mexican captives, a boy and a girl no older than 10, brought forward. He spoke to his wife. She translated to Elijah. The shooters who did this, they were not soldiers. They were Comancheros, traders. They saw our herd, saw we were wounded and slow from the fight with the settlers. They tried to take it for themselves, to steal the stealers. The hypocrisy was staggering. The very parasites the Comanche supplied were turning on them. Iron Shirt's gaze was like flint. We go to the canyon of the dry river to trade. The same Comancheros will be there. They will have many guns. They will try to take the herd again. He paused, letting the translation catch up. You want your cattle back. I want to reach my people with our wealth, and I want to punish the liars. He gestured to the herd, then to his weakened band. We are slow. You are one man, but you see the trail like a Comanche. You will scout ahead, find the Comancheros' camp. Tell us their number, their position. Elijah was being offered a role, not freedom, not his cattle, a job, a test. If he agreed, he would be helping the very raiders he chased. If he refused, he would likely be killed. But within the impossible choice, he saw a sliver of a plan, a way to turn this entire situation inside out. He nodded. Equipped with just his knife, a water skin, and a promise that his horse packs would be cared for, Elijah set out ahead of the lumbering herd. The canyon of the dry river was 2 days' ride. He moved like a ghost, using every trick he knew, and on the evening of the second day, he found them. The Comanchero camp was nestled in a box canyon, hidden from the plains but vulnerable from the rim above. He counted 15 men. Their corral held not goods but over 30 extra horses, remounts for a quick attack. They weren't setting up for trade. They were preparing an ambush. Elijah crawled back to a safe distance, his mind racing. He had the information. He could return to Iron Shirt, seal his pact with the raiders, and maybe, just maybe, get his cattle back through some twisted form of gratitude. But then he looked again at the camp. These were the dregs of the frontier, men who profited from the cycle of raid and retaliation, selling guns that would kill settlers and Comanche alike. They were the true poison in this land. A new, dangerous idea began to form. What if he didn't just scout for Iron Shirt? What if he scouted for himself? He waited for full dark. The Comanchero camp was loud with laughter and drink, confident in their hidden position. They had posted only one sentry at the canyon mouth. Elijah, using the skills that had let him track 150 cattle across a wilderness, approached from the sheer rock face, a route no horse could take. He found the sentry dozing against a rock. A quick, quiet strike with a rock rendered the man unconscious. Elijah didn't kill him. He took his rifle and pistol and vanished back into the night. He then climbed to the high rim of the canyon. He aimed the stolen rifle at the largest pile of firewood next to the canvas-covered trade goods. He took a deep breath and fired. The shot was a thunderclap in the confined canyon. The spark ignited the dry wood. Within minutes, a secondary explosion, gunpowder stored too close, tore through the camp. Panic erupted. Men scrambled for horses that were now spooked and stamping in the tight corral. In the chaos of fire and shouting, Elijah fired 3 more shots at random intervals, the echoes making it sound like a full attacking party was shooting from the heights. To the Comancheros below, it could only be one thing. A rival band, or the very Comanche they were planning to betray, had found them first. They didn't stay to fight. They mounted whatever horses they could catch and fled the canyon in a disorganized rout, leaving behind a burning camp and most of their supplies. Elijah watched them go, the acrid smell of smoke in his nostrils. He had just single-handedly destroyed an armed Comanchero camp, and he had done it without Iron Shirt or his warriors lifting a finger. He returned to the Comanche band at dawn. He told Iron Shirt the truth, but in a specific order. The Comancheros were 15. They were heavily armed. They planned to ambush you at the canyon mouth. He showed them the stolen rifle as proof. Iron Shirt's face darkened with fury. Then Elijah delivered the second part. But they are gone. I fired on their camp from the ridge. They thought they were under attack by many warriors. They ran. A stunned silence fell over the listeners. The wife translated, her voice laced with disbelief. One man scattered 15 armed Comancheros. It was impossible, yet here was the rifle, and here was Elijah unharmed. The story wasn't just an account, it was a legend in the making. To the Comanche, courage in battle was valued above all, but cleverness that delivered victory without losing a single warrior, that was the stuff of stories told around winter fires. Iron Shirt looked at Elijah with a new, profound intensity. The tracker who thought like a Comanche was also a warrior who fought like a spirit, striking from nowhere and vanishing. He had removed their enemy without costing Iron Shirt a single life. He had protected the herd. He had, in the most practical sense, saved them all. The band reached the now-abandoned canyon without incident. The smoldering remains of the Comanchero camp were sifted through. They found barrels of gunpowder, bags of lead shot, bolts of cloth, and metal tools, all the intended trade goods, now forfeit. It was a fortune. Iron Shirt called the band together. He spoke for a long time, his voice gaining strength. Elijah understood none of the words, but he felt the weight of them. The people listened, their eyes moving from their chief to the solitary white man. Then Iron Shirt's wife approached Elijah. She held out his original rifle, his knife, all his possessions. "The cattle," she said in her broken Spanish. "You take them." Elijah's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the reward, the end of his quest. He could gather the herd and begin the long, dangerous drive back to Texas alone. But as he looked at the 150 heads and then at the expectant, waiting faces of the Comanche band, he knew it was a death sentence. One man could not control that many cattle across hostile territory. He would be a slow, juicy target for every outlaw, every rival band, every Comanchero seeking revenge. Iron Shirt was watching him, that same knowing glint in his eye. He had not just given Elijah a gift. He had given him an impossible task. It was another test, the real one. Elijah made his choice. He pointed to the herd, then to Iron Shirt, and shook his head. Then he pointed east, back toward Texas, then to himself, and held up all 10 fingers twice. 20. He would take 20 head. A recovery, not a victory. A symbolic return of a portion. The rest were Iron Shirts, taken in fair raid. But for them to be truly his, he needed to get them safely north to his main camp. He then pointed to the captured Comanchero goods, the guns, the powder, the tools. He pointed to the remaining cattle, then to the warriors. His proposal was insane. He would not take his full herd. Instead, he would help Iron Shirt's band escort the rest of the cattle and the captured goods north, using his scouting skills to avoid further ambush. In return, they would give him his 20 head and see him safely to the edge of settled territory. It was a bargain, a trade of skills for safety, a mutual agreement between two parties who, by every law of the land, should be trying to kill each other. Iron Shirt considered it for a long, tense minute. Then he grunted, a short, sharp sound of agreement. He barked an order. 20 of the best cattle were cut from the herd and placed in a separate holding group, Elijah's share. But then Iron Shirt did something else. He called forward Coyote Running, the young scout, and 2 other warriors. He spoke to them, then his wife translated for Elijah. "These men will go with you, all the way. They will help you drive your 20. They will make sure you reach your home." Elijah started to protest. Bringing Comanche warriors to the edge of his settlement was asking for a massacre, but Iron Shirt cut him off. "They go to learn, to see the land through your eyes." And he added, the grim smile returning, "So you do not get shot by your own people when you return with Comanche cattle." It was a shield, and it was a leash. Elijah would not be traveling with a few helpers. He would be accompanied by a Comanche escort. His return would now be a diplomatic mission, not a triumphant rescue. The journey back began, a bizarre caravan, the main Comanche band driving the bulk of the herd northwest, and Elijah, with his 20 cattle and his 3 silent, watchful Comanche guides, turning east. For a week they moved in a tense but efficient harmony. The warriors, true to their word, were expert drovers. They spoke little but observed everything. Elijah, in turn, taught them what he knew of the approaching territory, where the few water holes were, where the new settlements had sprung up. It was a cautious exchange of maps, drawn in the dirt at each campfire. They were 2 days from the first Texan outpost when Coyote Running, scouting ahead as usual, returned at a gallop. His face was etched with urgency. He spoke rapidly, pointing back the way they had come. Elijah understood only one word, repeated like a drumbeat: Tejanos, Tejanos, Tejanos. A large group of riders, 30, maybe 40, was on their trail, and they were closing fast. It was the posse from the settlement, the very men Elijah had told not to follow. They had grown impatient or desperate and had armed themselves to the teeth, and they were about to stumble upon a scene that defied all comprehension. Their missing rancher traveling peacefully with 3 armed Comanche warriors. To their eyes, it would have only one meaning: captivity, or worse, collaboration. Elijah stood, looking from the anxious faces of his Comanche escorts to the distant dust plume of the approaching posse. A single misstep now would trigger a bloodbath. He had to get to them first. He had to explain the unexplainable. He turned to Coyote Running, the words sticking in his dry throat. "Stay here, hide the cattle, do not show yourselves. No matter what you hear, do not come out." He mounted Pax, feeling the weight of the stolen Comanchero rifle on his back. He was about to ride out and confront the armed, furious embodiment of everything he had been sent to remedy, and he would have to do it with the truth, a truth no one on that frontier was ready to hear. Elijah Carter rode out to meet the storm he had left behind. The posse, led by a red-faced, furious man named Harlan Shaw, a neighbor who had lost half his own herd in the raid, came to a skidding, dusty halt at the sight of him. 40 men, armed with everything from hunting rifles to ancient muskets, stared in disbelief. He was alive, he was unharmed, and he was alone. "Elijah, God Almighty, we thought you were dead or captured," Shaw boomed, lowering his shotgun slightly. Then his eyes narrowed, scanning the empty horizon behind him. "Where's the herd? Did you find them?" "I found them," Elijah said, his voice steady. "They're safe. We're bringing 20 head back." A murmur of cautious relief went through the group. 20 was better than nothing, but Shaw's suspicion didn't fade. "We? Who's we? And where are they?" Elijah took a slow breath. There was no gentle way to say it. "The Comanche, the raiding band, we made an agreement." The silence that followed was colder and more deadly than any shout. 40 faces hardened into masks of shock and betrayal. Harlan Shaw's knuckles went white on his shotgun stock. "You made an agreement with the devils that stole from us, that have been killing our kin for 10 years. "It's not what you think," Elijah said, raising his hands. He laid it out in blunt, rapid strokes. The wounded chief, the medicine, the Comanchero ambush, the deal for safe passage. He presented it as a business transaction, a salvage operation in hostile territory. He did not speak of respect. He did not mention the shared hunt. He framed it as the only logical choice for a man who wanted to see any of his property again. It didn't matter. To the posse, every word was a confession of treason. "You treated him," a young man snarled. "You saved the life of the man who ordered my brother's ranch burned." "You're traveling with them," another shouted. "You brought them here." "They are not here," Elijah insisted. "They are waiting, hidden, for me to bring you back so we can collect the cattle and they can go. That is the agreement. Take the 20 head, let them leave in peace. No blood." Harlan Shaw spat on the ground. "No blood. The only good agreement with a Comanche is a dead one." He gestured sharply to his men. "You're gonna take us to where they're hidden, right now. We'll get our cattle, all of them, and we'll send those murderers straight to hell." Elijah shook his head. "If you ride in there with guns drawn, it will be a massacre. On both sides, they have warriors, they will fight. Men will die today for no reason. We get the 20 head, that's the deal." "The deal," Shaw sneered, "is over." He raised his shotgun, leveling it not at Elijah but past him. "You're gonna lead us, or we'll ride out and find him ourselves, and when we do, we'll kill every last one, including any white man we find standing with him." Elijah was trapped. If he led them to the hidden draw, he was leading 3 men to their deaths and guaranteeing a war party would return to burn the settlement to the ground. If he refused, the posse would fan out, find the Comanche by accident, and the same thing would happen. There was only one terrible play left. "All right," Elijah said, his shoulders slumping in feigned defeat. "I'll take you, but you have to let me ride in first, alone. If they see all of you, they'll scatter the cattle and attack. Let me get the herd moving toward you, then you can take them." Shaw squinted, weighing the lie. He saw a broken man capitulating. He nodded. "You got 1 hour. We'll be right behind you. Any trick, Carter, and you're the first one we shoot." Elijah turned packs and rode back the way he came, his heart a drum of dread. He had bought an hour to undo everything. He galloped into the hidden draw where Coyote running and the 2 others waited, tense and ready. Elijah didn't dismount. "Posse," he said, the word enough. He pointed east, away from the approaching Texans, then to the cattle. "Go, now, drive them north, fast, do not stop." Coyote running understood immediately, but he pointed at Elijah, then at the ground. "A question, what about you?" Elijah shook his head. "I will lead them away. Go, tell Iron Shirt." He searched for words that wouldn't translate. "Tell him the agreement is broken by my people. The dead is mine." He slapped the rump of the lead steer in the 20-head group, startling them into motion. The 3 warriors shared a final, unreadable look with Elijah, then turned, expertly moving the small herd out of the draw and north at a brisk trot, melting into the broken landscape. Elijah was left with nothing. No cattle, no proof. He had just sent his only leverage, the 20 head, back to the Comanche. He waited until the dust settled, then mounted and rode not north but west, circling wide. He fired his rifle once into the air, a signal of nothing, a distraction. Then he began to ride in erratic loops, creating a confusing, sprawling trail of a single rider. When Harlan Shaw and the posse found him an hour later, he was sitting on a rock, his rifle across his knees, utterly alone in an empty stretch of scrubland. The rage on Shaw's face was apocalyptic. "Where are they?" he screamed. "Gone," Elijah said simply. "They must have seen your dust. They took the cattle and ran." For a moment he thought Shaw would shoot him on the spot. The man trembled with the effort of control. You let them go, after all of this. You had them and you let them go." "I didn't let them, they left. They are Comanche. This is their land. They move like ghosts." Elijah stood facing the mob. "The cattle are lost. Going after them now is suicide. We go home." He was not hailed as a returning hero. He was not even accepted as a failed one. He was branded something worse, a collaborator, a Comanche lover, the man who had the thieves in his sights and opened the gate for them. The story warped as it traveled back to the settlement. By the time they arrived, the tale was that Elijah Carter had been living with the raiders, had helped them steal the cattle, and had only returned to spy. He was shunned. No one would speak to him. Men crossed the street to avoid him. His remaining few animals were mysteriously let loose. His well was fouled. The message was clear: leave, or else. The very community he had risked his life to salvage a piece of had exiled him for the method of his attempt. Broken in a way the frontier never could break him, Elijah prepared to abandon his ranch. But on the morning he planned to leave, a rider approached. Not a neighbor, a young Mexican boy on a tired pony. He handed Elijah a piece of folded deerskin, then turned and fled. On the skin, drawn in charcoal, was a map, not of the plains but of the Texas hill country. A specific creek bend was marked, and below it 3 symbols: a turtle, a coyote, and a rising sun. The symbols of Coyote Running's band. It was an invitation, or a summons. With nothing left to lose, Elijah went. The journey took 4 days. The creek bend was a secluded, grassy spot with fresh water, and there, waiting for him, were Coyote Running and 5 other warriors. And with them, grazing peacefully, were the 20 head of cattle. They had not taken them north. They had hidden them and guarded them for over a week. Coyote Running stepped forward. He spoke in Comanche, then gestured to a younger boy who knew a few Spanish words. The message was halting but clear. "Iron Shirt says the dead is not yours. The broken word is your people's. The cattle are yours. The promise is kept." They had honored the agreement even when his own people had not. They had protected his property from his own kind. The magnitude of the gesture left Elijah speechless. This was more than a business deal. This was a statement of principle, of honor. In their eyes, he was the only white man who had ever dealt with them as a man, not as a demon or a slave, and they would treat him accordingly. Coyote Running then delivered the second, earth-shattering part of the message. The boy struggled with the words, pointing north, then making a sweeping motion with his arm. "Iron Shirt says the road is closed. The Comancheros who ran, they are angry. They tell the soldiers that Iron Shirt's band is weak, that they have many cattle and few warriors. The blue coats and the rangers, they are coming. A big fight. You cannot go home. Your people hate you. The soldiers will hunt you if you go north with us." Elijah was caught in a vice. To the south, exile and hatred. To the north, a looming war between the U.S. Army and the very band he was now inexplicably tied to. Coyote Running pointed to the cattle, then to the east. "There is another way. Not Texan land, not Comanche land. In between. Empty land. You take cattle, you wait. The storm passes." They were offering him a third path. Not assimilation, but sanctuary. A hidden valley they knew of, disputed territory where he could sit out the coming conflict. A place where a man with 20 head could start over, unseen by either world. It was a staggering offer. It was also a permanent farewell. To accept meant turning his back on his race, his nation, any future in settled Texas. He would become a ghost, living in the shadow of two civilizations at war. But what did he have to go back to? A burned cabin and the contempt of his neighbors. He accepted. For 3 months, Elijah lived in the hidden valley with his cattle. The Comanche visited occasionally, bringing news. They taught him how to make pemmican, how to find water in dry washes. He, in turn, showed them tricks with a lasso, how to better condition horses for long travel. A quiet, practical friendship grew in the geopolitical wilderness. Then Coyote Running arrived with urgent news. The storm had not passed, it had exploded. The U.S. Army, guided by vengeful Comancheros, had located one of Iron Shirt's main winter camps. A battle was imminent. Iron Shirt, still not at full strength, was outnumbered and outgunned. But he had a plan. A dangerous, desperate plan that required moving the entire camp, elders, women, children, and all their horse herds, across 50 miles of open ground to a stronger defensive position. And they needed a scout who knew the Middle Territory better than anyone. A scout who could see like both a Texan and a Comanche. They were asking Elijah Carter to guide them, to lead a Comanche band to safety against the U.S. Army. The moment he did it, there would be no coming back. He would be a traitor in the eyes of the law forever. But the man who had saved Iron Shirt's life, and whose life Iron Shirt's people had effectively saved in return, looked at the worried face of the young warrior who had become the closest thing he had to a friend. He asked for one thing, that when it was done, they would help him get a message, just one, to the Martinez family down in San Antonio. Not to explain, just to say he was alive. Coyote Running agreed. The exodus was a nerve-shredding feat of sheer will. Elijah, navigating by stars and landforms he'd only seen on the deerskin map, led the band of 200 people through a labyrinth of canyons and dry rivers. They moved at night, hid by day. They were within 10 miles of the safe canyon when the Army scouts found their trail. What followed was not a grand battle but a running fight, a rearguard action. Elijah fought alongside Coyote Running, not with a rifle but as a strategist, pointing out choke points and escape routes. He used his knowledge of the land to funnel the pursuing cavalry into narrow defiles where Comanche marksmen could pick them off from the cliffs. He helped save the horse herd, the lifeblood of the band, by diverting a company of soldiers with a false cattle trail. When the band finally reached the safety of the fortified canyon, they had lost warriors, but they had saved the people. As the exhausted families filed into the new camp, Iron Shirt, now fully healed and radiating authority, walked to where Elijah stood, covered in dust and gunpowder. Through a translator, he spoke not to the group but to Elijah alone. The white men have a word, they call us hostiles, savages. They say we cannot be reasoned with, that we understand only killing. Iron Shirt's eyes were like black coals. You have shown them to be liars. You have shown my people that a Tejano can have honor, that a man's word can be stronger than his tribe. He placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. You have no home with them, you have a home here, not as a captive, not as a slave, as a brother. The cattle you brought back, they were the seed. This, he gestured to the safe camp, the saved families, is the harvest. We followed you once into the canyon of the Comancheros. We will follow you again. He turned and addressed the assembled band, his voice rising in power. He spoke of the journey, of the battle, of the white scout who fought not for plunder, but for a promise. And then he uttered the words that would echo through the rest of Elijah Carter's life. He pointed to Elijah and to the 30 warriors of his personal guard, the fiercest, most loyal fighters in the band. From this son to the last son, the translator whispered, their lives are your life. Their strength is your strength. Where you lead, they follow. This is our word. Now we follow you. It was not a request. It was a declaration, a bloodless adoption into the fabric of the band. Elijah Carter, the solitary tracker, now stood as a leader of 30 Comanche warriors. He had gone to recover stolen property and had instead inherited a family, an army, and a war. And as he looked at the faces of the men now bound to him, he knew the true cost. The point of no return was not a line on a map. It was a line drawn in the sand of his own soul, and he had just crossed it. The final stage of his impossible journey was about to begin, and it would demand a price he had never imagined paying. The meaning of those words, "Now we follow you," settled on Elijah Carter not as an honor but as a yoke of impossible responsibility. He was not a war chief. He did not speak the language. He did not know the intricate social codes of the band. He was a figurehead with real power, a dangerous contradiction. For the first month, he was a ghost in the camp. He gave no orders. He simply observed, learned, and with Coyote running as his constant shadow and translator, he began to listen. The 30 warriors assigned to him were not young hotheads. They were seasoned fighters, the group that had served as Iron Shirt's personal guard. Their leader was a man named T-U-Bar Glottalstop and a W-U-Bar S-U-Bar, or Spotted Pony, a veteran of countless raids with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. They watched Elijah with a flat, analytical patience. They were testing the chief's strange new pet. The test came with the first real decision. A hunting party returned with news of a buffalo herd 3 days to the north, but scouts also brought word of U.S. cavalry patrols thickening along the Red River. Taking the whole band north to hunt was to risk the very confrontation they had just escaped. But winter was coming. The meat was essential. Iron Shirt called a council. The traditionalists argued for the hunt. The risk was the price of life. Others argued for caution, to break into smaller groups and hunt smaller game, staying hidden. The debate went in circles. Finally, Iron Shirt looked at Elijah, who had been sitting silently. The white scout sees the land differently. What does he see? All eyes turned to him. Elijah spoke slowly through Coyote running. The cavalry looks for one thing, a large Comanche band, a trail of many people, many horses. They do not look for one thing, a Texan cattle drive. A confused silence followed. Elijah laid out his plan. They would not go north as a band. He, with his 30 warriors, would go. But they would not go as Comanche hunters. They would go as something else. Using the 20 head of cattle as both cover and trade goods, they would travel as a group of mestizo drovers moving cattle to market, a common enough sight. The warriors would hide their paint, their long hair under wide-brimmed hats taken from the Comanchero supplies. They would carry their weapons wrapped in blankets. Elijah, the only one who could pass as white, would be the trail boss. It was audacious. It was humiliating to some, the greatest horsemen on earth pretending to be lowly drovers. But Iron Shirt saw the cunning. It was not a retreat. It was a disguise. A wolf moving in sheep's clothing right under the shepherd's nose. He approved it. The journey north was a tense masterpiece of deception. Elijah rode point, his posture that of a weary rancher. Behind him, his drovers moved the cattle with a skill no real drover could match. They passed within 2 miles of a cavalry encampment. Soldiers waved. Elijah tipped his hat. The scouts saw only cattle and what looked like Mexican vaqueros. The disguise held. They reached the buffalo herd. And here, Elijah's men reverted to their true nature with breathtaking efficiency. In a single day, using their bows and lances from horseback, they took down enough animals to feed the band for months. The cattle, meanwhile, served a second purpose: the pack animals to carry the heavy loads of meat and hides back south. The operation was a flawless success. They returned to the hidden canyon without a single shot fired, without the army ever knowing their prey had walked through their camp. That return changed everything. The band saw the laden pack horses. They saw their warriors unharmed, grinning with triumph. They saw not just food, but a new kind of victory, one won by wit, not just blood. Spotted Pony, the stoic guard leader, walked up to Elijah. He didn't speak. He simply placed his hand over his own heart, then gestured to Elijah. It was a salute. The 30 were no longer just following orders. They were following him. This pattern defined the next 5 years. Elijah's role evolved into that of a strategist and a buffer. He used his unique position to negotiate not raids, but trades with isolated Mexican villages south of the Rio Grande, exchanging buffalo hides for corn and metal tools, avoiding violence. He taught the band how to selectively breed their massive horse herds for specific traits, using knowledge from his ranching days. Under his and Iron Shirt's dual leadership, the band prospered and stayed one step ahead of the ever-tightening noose of the U.S. Army. But the world outside was shrinking. The great buffalo herds were being slaughtered by hide hunters. Settlements multiplied like weeds. The Comancheria was being eaten from the edges. News came of other bands, starved and desperate, surrendering at reservations. The pressure was a constant, low drumbeat. In the spring of 1859, Coyote Running, now a respected sub-chief, married. His wife was a fierce, intelligent woman from the band. At the wedding feast, Iron Shirt, his hair fully gray now, took Elijah aside. "The time of the free people is setting like the sun," he said, his voice heavy. "My time is setting. The young men talk of last fights, of dying with glory. This is not the way. You must show them the other way." Elijah knew what he was asking. The final, terrible test, not to lead them in war, but to lead them out of it, to navigate the surrender. The opportunity came from an unexpected direction. A company of Texas Rangers, led by a captain named Ephraim Bell, was operating with a brutal mandate: clear the region. They had tracked a different hostile band to a canyon just 30 miles from Iron Shirt's camp. A battle was coming, and Captain Bell had a reputation for leaving no survivors, man, woman, or child. Elijah made a decision that would haunt him. He sent Coyote Running with a message to the Rangers' camp, a message in English, written on a piece of stolen ledger paper. It stated that the band in the canyon were Pennatka, the very ones who had conducted the Great Raid of 1840. It gave their numbers, their weapon strength. It was a betrayal, but it was a targeted one. It diverted the Rangers' fury away from his band and toward a rival group that had been preying on settlements as well as other Comanche. The Rangers took the bait. The ensuing battle was a massacre of the Pennatka band. Captain Bell, intrigued by the precise intelligence from an anonymous friend, let it be known he was grateful. He also let it slip that he had orders to offer terms to any other band that would surrender before the summer campaign began. Elijah had created an opening, a bloody, morally fraught backdoor to the negotiation table. He presented it to Iron Shirt's council. The debate was the most violent he had ever witnessed. Young warriors, including some of his own 30, screamed for war. Elders spoke of slow starvation. Spotted Pony remained silent, his eyes on Elijah. Finally, Iron Shirt stood. He spoke of reality, of children with empty bellies, of the endless waves of blue coats. Then he pointed at Elijah. "When this man came to us, he was an enemy. He saw a path we did not. He has led us to food when we were hungry, to safety when we were hunted. He has never led us to shame. Now he sees a new path, a hard path. I will walk it. My family will walk it. Who will follow?" It was the ultimate validation. The chief was following the scout. Slowly, one by one, the warriors stood. Spotted Pony was the first of the 30 to rise, then Coyote Running. By nightfall, the band had decided. They would surrender, but on their terms. Elijah would arrange the meeting. The parley was held on a flat stretch of prairie near the Brazos River. Captain Ephraim Bell and 20 Rangers faced Iron Shirt, Elijah, and 10 unarmed warriors. The air was thick with mutual hatred and suspicion. Bell's eyes narrowed at the sight of a white man, weathered and dressed in buckskin, standing at the right hand of a Comanche chief. "Name yourself," Bell demanded. "Elijah Carter." A ripple went through the Rangers. The name was known, the traitor, the Comanche lover. Bell's hand drifted to his pistol. "You are a wanted man for collaboration and treason." Elijah didn't flinch. "I am here under a flag of truce to discuss the surrender of this band. Their terms are simple. They will lay down their arms and settle on the reservation at Fort Cobb. In return, they keep their horse herd, every animal. Their families remain intact. No one is imprisoned. And," he added, his voice hardening, "I am granted a full pardon for my role in facilitating this peace." Bell laughed, a harsh bark. "You're in no position to make demands, Carter. You'll be in irons by sundown, and these savages will surrender unconditionally or be wiped out. It was then that Iron Shirt spoke through Coyote running. "You have many men, you have big guns, but you are blind." He gestured to the horizon. "My warriors are not here, they are there and there and there." He pointed to 3 distant ridgelines. As if on signal, a single rider appeared on each crest, then vanished. A demonstration. The band was not a trapped group, they were a deployed force. Bell's company was surrounded. The ranger captain's face purpled with rage, but also with dawning understanding. This was not a desperate surrender. It was a strategic negotiation from a position of hidden strength. They could fight and win, but at a cost his superiors would not thank him for. The public relations victory of peacefully bringing in a major band, however, would make his career. He gritted his teeth. The horse herd will be reduced to 5 per warrior, the rest confiscated. 10, Elijah countered. 8. Agreed. The Treaty of Brazos Bend was scribbled on a piece of army stationery that afternoon. Iron Shirt's band became one of the last major Comanche groups to settle on a reservation voluntarily, and the only one to do so with their social structure and a significant portion of their wealth, their horses, intact. As the band began the somber journey to Fort Cobb, Elijah Carter received his signed pardon from a furious Captain Bell. The document stated he was being absolved for services rendered to the Republic of Texas and the United States in the pacification of the Comanche. It was the official lie that would sanitize his history. He stood at the crossroads as the band moved out. Iron Shirt rode over to him. The old chief looked at the pardon in Elijah's hand, then at his face. "You have your paper. Your people will call you a hero again. Will you go?" Elijah looked at the long line of people, at Spotted Pony who gave a slight nod, at Coyote running who smiled sadly. He thought of the empty ranch, the crossed streets, the fouled well. He thought of the silent understanding around a shared campfire, of the trust forged in canyons and storms. He crumpled the pardon and let it fall to the dust. "My people are going this way," he said. He rode with them to Fort Cobb. He lived with them on the reservation for 2 years, a strange, white elder who helped translate and buffer the constant conflicts with corrupt Indian agents. He watched as the horse herd, their spirit, was slowly stolen or swindled away. He watched Iron Shirt sicken and die of pneumonia in a drafty cabin, a world away from the open plains. When the old chief was gone, Elijah knew his work was done. The band was safe as it could be in a broken world. He said quiet farewells to Coyote running and Spotted Pony. Then, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a single horse, he disappeared. He drifted south into Mexico, eventually finding work as a foreman on a large hacienda in Coahuila, his past a closed book. He never spoke of the Comanche, of the 30 who followed him, of the chief whose life he saved. He lived out his days there, dying quietly in 1888 at the age of 86. He was buried in an unmarked grave. But his story did not die with him. It fragmented. In Texas, he was remembered as a minor, confusing footnote, a rancher who disappeared, possibly killed by Comanches, possibly a turncoat. In the oral histories of the Comanche people at Fort Cobb, a different story was passed down, of a white spirit who came from the east, who walked 2 worlds, and who used the cunning of the white man to protect the people until the very end. They did not know his final resting place, but they remembered his name. And in a dusty archive in Austin, Texas, filed away in a box of Ranger reports, sits Captain Ephraim Bell's official account of the pacification of Iron Shirt's band. In it, he mentions a shadowy guide, a reformed squaw man who provided crucial intelligence. And attached to that report, preserved by a clerk's indifference, is that original, crumpled pardon, smoothed flat and paperclipped to the page. A tangible record of the moment a man chose a family over a flag, and of the 30 warriors who, against all odds in history, once followed him into a new kind of battle. The story of the cattle, it turns out, was never about the cattle at all. It was about what a man rediscovers of himself when everything else is stolen away. And sometimes, The most loyal army you can earn is not the one that fights for your cause, but the one that fights for your word. Elijah Carter's name may have faded from the history books, but the resonance of his choice echoes through a simple, uncomfortable truth. In the furnace of the frontier, where identities were supposed to be forged in hatred, he found his not in opposition but in understanding. His story forces us to ask what we truly own: the land we claim, the cattle we brand, or the integrity we hold when no one is left to witness it. History prefers clean narratives, heroes and villains, victors and vanquished, but the dust of the Llano Estacado holds millions of stories like grit in its soil, stories that don't fit the myth. They are stories of impossible alliances, of quiet courage that looks like betrayal, of men and women who saw the humanity on the other side of the rifle's sight and could not unsee it. These are the stories that complicate our past, and in doing so, they complicate us. They remind us that the most profound revolutions are not always fought on battlefields, but in the silent, steadfast choosing of one difficult path over an easy one. So the next time you hear a tale of the Old West, of cowboys and Comanche, remember the space between the lines. Remember that the most valuable thing a person can recover might not be stolen livestock, but a stolen sense of purpose. And that sometimes, the deepest loyalty is sworn not with a signed treaty, but with a silent, mutual decision to follow a shared truth into the unknown. If you found this journey into the shadows of history compelling, there are countless more untold stories waiting to be discovered. We delve into them every week here, so consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. You never know which forgotten fragment of the past will change the way you see the present. Thank you for listening. Until the next story.